Welcome to Parentless Podcast. Please note that in this show you may hear graphic descriptions or language that may not be appropriate for everyone. Listener discretion advised. Hey there, it's Steph. Welcome in. You're joining the first episode of Parentless Podcast for the new year, 2021. One hint I have for you in 2021. Are you ready? Don't have any expectations and it can't let you down. Just kidding. It doesn't work that way. Hey, for this week, I want to direct you to episode number 4. This features my friend Jessie speaking about losing her dad. Jessie and her dad had a song that was special to them. And so in her father's death, she has noticed that in times of need, that song has come on and she has found comfort in it. I received so many goosebumps from listening to Jessie's story. There are other stories like this as well. You need to tune in. Episode 4, it was like messages from him. As always, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show so you don't miss any episodes when they're released. Thank you.
My name is Patricia Qhobela-Jenkins. I am 42 years old. I need to get used to saying that out loud. I am a podcast editor, self-taught. I am self-employed. Right now, I am based in the UK. But I've been living for the past 4 years in the US and plan to return to the US early next year. I guess you could say I'm sort of a digital nomad without the nomadic bit happening every couple of months. Like I said, I'm self-employed. My company's called Podcast Maven. And I do have my own podcast, but that's basically talking to expat women. And we can get onto that if we have time to later. And I am married. Yes, let me not forget that. I am married.
This is a fact in the Jackson Youth Study.
Little oval face that makes me sad comes and goes by. Could wrote the book of Joe instead. Oh, to go now. Heavy eyes, so help me make this bed. Over and over. Tell me what it
How long have you been married?
takes to make you stay.
See, I'm not great at dates. I just know that I'm still happily married.
Hey, that's what matters.
So I think we've been married about 4 years, but we've been together going on 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Neither of us really wanted to get married. We were very happy with the way things were. And the oddest thing was, it was easier for us to get a visa to the US when we were married. So we got married. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. There are some things that are just easier.
But the weirdest thing is that we were moving from the Middle East and we managed to live in the Middle East without being married. And then to get to the US, it was like easier for us to be married. And we're just like the irony.
Isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Well, Patricia, welcome to Parentless Podcast. Thank you so much for stopping in and talking to us today.
Thank you. I'm a little bit nervous, but I like the topic. I think we kind of need to open up the conversation a lot more. So thank you for having me.
Yes, you're welcome. And not to toot my own horn, but I will tell you that many people are very comfortable with me just after a few minutes. So
glad to hear it. That's probably why the show has been going on so long.
Yeah. So, and I do want to say that, you know, that the topic that we are discussing is very hard for some people to talk about. So the way that I liked to format the show was really with some who, what, where, when, how questions. And I really like the direct approach. And I think to some people that might seem harsh, but to us, I mean, that's our lives. That's what we're living with. And we just need to talk about all sides of everything that we've been through. Who died for you? Why are we here?
Okay, so both my parents have passed away. My father died first. And it was, even though he was ill and I expected it, it still came as a shock. I don't think there's anything in life that prepares you for that phone call. And I knew it was so weird. I knew what the phone call was about because my brother was calling me, and my brother never calls me. He just doesn't call people. So I'm like looking at my phone and it's 8:00 in the morning. And I'm just like, yeah, I know what this is going to be. And then he called and he's like, no, you know what, Trish, Dad has passed away. And the crappiest thing was, okay, so how to tell this shortly. I was in Lebanon at the time, and I had just spent a month at home in Lesotho, which is in Southern Africa. It's a country in Southern Africa. I'd spent a month at home in Lesotho with my dad and my mom, and I'd been making arrangements so that he could go to hospital visits, so that they could get more help at home, so that all of those kind of arrangements you make for elderly parents. Then I got back to Lebanon, and it was less than a week when I got that call. So I think it had been 3 or 4 days since I arrived. And then it was like, I got that call, and the details of that day are very vague. I don't, I don't express emotion strongly.
Okay, that's okay. Let's see. So tell me, how old was he?
He was in his 80s. So, I think my dad was like 82, 83, something like that.
You know how old you were?
Well, I wasn't 40 yet. So I was in my late 30s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Where were you when you got this call from your brother?
It was early morning. My husband was getting ready for work, and we were basically still in bed, or I was in bed. Just those early morning starts where your spouse is getting ready. I'm not a morning person, so I was still in bed. He was getting up, doing his thing, and then the phone rang. And I think we both knew, because I just looked at him and I said, oh, it's my brother. And he's like, yeah.
Okay. So what happened with your dad? You said he was ill, and it was kind of expected, but still unexpected. So what was he ill with?
Right. So we believe that it was prostate cancer, and that's an odd way to put it, but the medical system in Lesotho is, it's shit. It's not good. So yeah, I think what the last thing that really removed him from this earth was prostate cancer. Yeah. And it went untreated. And then he had all of the things that go with that. But, he'd been sickly for a while, but I know. Yeah. I think I wrote in the notes that the questions you asked me, my dad and I had a rocky relationship right through the 20s up until my early 30s. So I guess, so the time when I did go home, that was when, not when we made our peace, but I think that's when we really started connecting, not just as father and daughter, but as two adults. And I'm just looking, saying, okay, I kind of get some of the life decisions you made. I wouldn't have made them myself, but I kind of get that life doesn't come with a rule book.
So that's super important. I mean, even though, so your dad, a lot of the people that I talk to, their parents may have passed away, they may not have lived to be in their 70s or 80s. But you still had that rocky relationship. So it wasn't like you had a whole lifetime really of being close with your dad. And it was really just that short amount of time there at the end. I'm smiling. I'm glad that you did have that time with him, because I think that's super important. And the fact that you mentioned that you were able to understand some of his life's decisions, I think that's such a big part of, growth and life, I guess, is just finally having that moment of understanding of your parents, of why they did some of the stuff that they did. Because it does take a while, I think, to get some of that. So I guess I'm over here being a little bit happy for you to have that you had that time for him.
That time with him too. Yeah, he wasn't the world's easiest man. In fact, he was quite difficult. It's so, it's so difficult to explain somebody. It wasn't just bad habits. I guess you could call it parts of him were like a bad character. There were parts of him, like if I encountered that in anybody on the street, or let's say if I encountered it with you, I would never speak to you again. But he was my dad. So I guess it was like that kind of, okay, we had to have a relationship. But near the end, I mean, he knew he was dying. And we had some conversations, and he had always been so brave and also just full of bluster and sometimes bullshit. So he wasn't a man that would ever say, I cried, or I was afraid, or he was always, no, I stood up to them, all of that kind of thing. And as an adult, you're like, no, there are times when we are afraid. It's normal. But towards the end, in that last month, he was lying in bed, and I was just sitting with him, and we were just talking, and he was saying that he was afraid. And I am 42 years old, and that was the only time I'd ever heard my dad say, I'm afraid. And he felt that some of the decisions he had made had wasted so much of his time in life. And he was all, I wish I could do it again. And it was both touching, because I know I'm the only person he said that to. And it was heartbreaking to think of somebody getting to 80 thinking that I wasted time, or I didn't get a chance, or I need more time. And it was hard to hear it and process it, but I feel touched that at least he was able to get it out, and that I'm the person he chose to tell.
Right. So you mentioned your one brother. Do you have other siblings?
No, it's just me and my brother. That's why I'm not good at sharing.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So out of you and your brother, he chose you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Difficult relationships. Our upbringing, let's just say it didn't look like the Cosby Show. It's hard to describe. It was a home where there wasn't a lot of violence, but there was always a tension in the air. Let me speak for myself. I felt freer when I was a kid when my dad was not home. So when I got out of the house for university, that was a lot of freedom. And then you decide how you want to interact with your parents. And I decided that I really didn't want to interact with them that much at all. So that was part of the difficulty. Yeah, and part of the stuff like I have to process now that they're past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to come back to that, you choosing to kind of to step away. And that's kind of something that you do have to do sometimes. All right. So right now we're going to go back and kind of just talk about your mom a little bit. One important thing too. What was your dad's name?
Patricia Jeremiah Qhobela-Jenkins.
Very good. So out of the names that you wrote me, I did not get Jeremiah.
I forgot.
Because you didn't put that in there. Okay. I was like, well, I would have gotten Jeremiah. I know I would have done that. Okay. Malapo though, right?
Yes.
Malapo.
Awesome. Oh, damn.
Okay. Okay. And what is your mom's name?
Here we go. Elizabeth Dipo Qhobela-Jenkins.
Very good. Elizabeth. And so did your dad have a nickname, or what was he called?
He wasn't a man that would have a nickname.
Okay.
That's the personality we're talking about most of the time. Yeah. Most of the people would call him Malapo. In my culture, you kind of call people by their last names, and based on what their dad was called, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. I can say that one, so that's okay. That's good. All right. So Elizabeth and Molapo were your parents. All right. So tell me about Elizabeth. How old was she when she passed away?
My mom had just turned 70 and she absolutely refused to have a party for her 70th birthday. To actually, it's really hard to give you history in snippets, but
you can tell me if you just want to take off and tell me the story of her. That's okay too. That's
okay.
Yeah.
So she was a very, very private person. She was just a very, very private person. It's kind of like I grew up in a weird house with a lot of secrets. And there are some things like I don't get why we couldn't talk about them, but it's like, okay, so she was a very private person. And my home was also one of domestic abuse. So that is a situation that my brother and I grew up in, which didn't help the relationship with my parents. So my mom, let's see. So she was 70 when she passed. She didn't want to party because she liked to keep people at arm's length. She kind of had a cheeky sense of humor, but you had to know her to appreciate it. What else? She was, I guess, the sickly person. She had lifestyle diseases. She had arthritis. And for the past 10 years, she developed dementia. And we didn't know what it was until close to the end. We just thought she was forgetful and things like that. But it was really sad to see her demise because this was a woman who had left home at 16 and got a scholarship to study in Ghana, and she studied in Egypt, and she spoke 6 languages, and she was an amazing mathematician, and she was studying medicine. And I guess it sounds dramatic. I guess life didn't turn out how she wanted it to be, and she was a little bit disappointed about how things turned out. But she was also traditional in her mindset. So once you're married, you stay married, even if the marriage is shit. Mm-hmm. That's another thought pattern which we didn't see eye to eye on. But I could see her open up a lot more with her granddaughter. She was a lot softer. She wasn't as strict. And I think that happens with grandparents anyway. Mm-hmm. She really worked hard, and I think study came easy to her, knowledge came easy to her. So I'm more creative. We clashed like any mother and daughter, but in the end, I was her caregiver. To see this strong woman who was so intelligent have to be bathed and to take her to the bathroom and to put her to bed and to set the alarm so you can wake up at night and take her to the bathroom and all of that. I was more of her caregiver than I was for my dad. She was my dad's caregiver. And when he passed, it's like she lost a lot of her hold on reality. Yeah. Okay, that sank very quickly. Do you want me to tell you some happier facts about her?
No, I mean, those are all very important things. Yeah, I do want to hear if you have any funny stories or anything like that too. We'll talk about that type of stuff too in remembrance. So with your mom, what did she end up passing away from?
She had the signs of dementia, and then she actually had a huge stroke. And where was I when she had that? I think we were just about to leave Lebanon. No, tell a lie. We were already in the US. She had a huge stroke. And then she had a caregiver, and her caregiver is still a part of my life today. She was amazing. I think when you hear that, the first thing you really want to do is rush home and just be there. But her caregiver was just straight with me, and she said, you know what, you can come home, but she's pulling through and there isn't really much you can do. So, which sounds harsh. But what happened was my mom had this huge stroke, and they didn't tell me immediately that she'd had a stroke. So I lost my shit when they did tell me. And it was like 2 weeks later.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking that it was kind of ballsy of the caregiver to say, oh, well, your mom is pulling through. That's why I was like, what? Like, how do you know? So, okay. 2 weeks later, that explains it.
Later, I was absolutely livid. But it happened. So yeah, once I had spoken to the caregiver, spoken to the relatives who were helping out, it seemed more practical, if you will, to use the money that I would use for a plane ticket to pay for her care and medical expenses. Mm-hmm. Also, my brother lived like down the road from her. So with all of my heart, I wanted to be with her. But I also had to think about, I had to weigh up how I would care for her as well. So that was the decision we made. And then she never regained her speech. Oh, okay. And then that's the thing that brings me to tears, because Dibor means the one who speaks. It means the one who talks a lot. And my mom could talk. Okay, so can I. You can see now, I can talk, but my mom was like 10 times what I can do. And that she lost her speech was the saddest thing, because as she was aging and with the lifestyle diseases, she was practically homebound. But you would find her on the phone. The neighborhood kids used to come into our house and keep her company. And then they would be talking to her about their day, and they would be watching TV in my house because we had like the satellite TV package. And it was beautiful to see and to know, because she still had contact around her just with people, and neighbors would drop in and all of this kind of thing. And because she had dementia, sometimes she just used to go wandering. But the neighborhood knew there was like a kind of neighborhood alarm system. So if somebody saw her, they would just invite her in and then send one of the kids so that the caregiver could come and get her. All of those things. So she had a second stroke, and that is when it sounds weird, but I kind of knew. I knew that she wasn't going to make it through this one. So that is when I did go home, and she was just in a hospital, and she developed an infection because of diabetes. She'd had to have a leg amputated, and then there was an infection. Oh, so here's a great thing. We were given a choice. They said they couldn't do anything more for her at the hospital. So they just said that we should take her home and make her comfortable. But she couldn't speak. She had to be changed. And, she was wearing adult diapers. She was sick. She couldn't control any of her bodily functions. And basically this infection that she had was just basically going to take over her whole body. And it wasn't going to be a pleasant way to go.
And they knew this, and that's how they sent you home with her.
Yeah.
But they told you this, right?
I found this out when I actually traveled home.
Did they tell your family? Did they tell the caregiver? Did the hospital say?
They told me, because it's hard to describe the difference in cultures. When you go into a hospital in the West, people sit you down and they gently tell you the worst. When you go to a hospital in my country, you have to make a lot of noise and not leave until somebody tells you what's going on. You have to do a lot of fighting. You have to do a lot of shouting. You kind of have to do some string pulling. It is so far outside what you see in Western hospitals that it's difficult to describe. So yes, it's only because they don't like to give you bad news. So they just said, oh, take her home and make her comfortable. And I'm like, no, well, what's wrong with her? Why shouldn't we bring her back? If she's got 3 weeks, 3 months,
Did they tell you that she has this infection? Did they just?
I had to take her to 2 or 3 hospitals to find that out. And then I had to find a doctor who was willing to do more of an amputation. And it was just a lot. So by the time after she had had the operation again, and she couldn't speak and she was bedridden and she couldn't even like lock eyes with you. It's like you would look at her and she wouldn't know you were there. I felt like I was at my end. I had no more to give and I had no more solutions. No matter how hard I pushed, there was nothing I could do. This disease or bacteria, whatever the hell it was just going to eat away at her. And we were just going to have to watch it. So I just prayed and I was just like, you know what, God, I'm here. I've seen her. I don't have what it takes in me to watch her die like that. So I think please just take her now. And she passed away about 2 days later.
And did she ever make it home or was she still in the hospital?
No, she was still in the hospital.
Okay.
She was in the hospital. That was the hardest bit of my mom's death. It was, knowing, I guess if you're Christian or whatever your belief system is, you always pray for healing and miracles and all of this kind of thing. But, I just knew I couldn't, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't have any more ideas. And I didn't know how to watch her die. I just couldn't because they wouldn't even have had drugs for pain relief. So I was just like, no. Yeah. It's very hard to admit that in public. I've only told a few people.
Yeah. So does that leave you with any type of, I don't know if guilt is the right word.
Sometimes I do, but even if I feel guilty, it's the truth. And the way I see it is I will be blunt. I didn't put a pillow over anybody's face as a mercy killing. I knew that I was empty. And it wasn't about me. There was no life in her. She was breathing, but there wasn't even semblance of a person left in her. So I feel that if the guilt was eating me up, I can go to therapy and deal with it.
Yeah. And I have to say, I have to tell you, you praying that, thinking those thoughts did not cause her death. Thank
you. I know. But
yeah.
You can get a lot of judgment, especially from religious people, but I'm not interested in people's judgment. And I think that also talking about death and illness and caregivers do a hell of a job. And it's hard to be a caregiver and a whatever your job title is as well. It's So that's how my mom passed away.
Okay. Well, that was a lot for you. And so you kind of took a lot of their life and their care and everything for them into your life for the last few years for them. Do you feel maybe a little bit lighter knowing that is no longer your responsibility? Yeah.
Yeah. And if I feel guilty, that would be mostly what I feel guilty about. It's the only word to describe it is kind of I'll say it. It's kind of a sense of relief. Yeah. It's kind of it's kind of a sense of relief. It is not in any way that they were a burden. And my upbringing and culture has the belief that it is your duty to look after your parents in the ways that you can. And I believe that, and I live that and I will help people who are going through that. So it's not like I was like, yay, freedom. But
yeah, no, you did what you could. I mean, they lived as long as they could. I mean, it doesn't sound like they would have had the strength to go on anyway. I mean,
yeah, that's exactly it. But I mean, had they have been alive, then there are things in my life that might have been different. If they were still alive, perhaps we would not have bought a house or decided to settle in the UK. Perhaps we would be looking at South Africa just so that we could have that proximity. Would that be top choice? No. So are things, so we can make choices based on our needs and wants now without having to factor that in. So I guess that's one of the ways in which life has changed. Yeah. Or gotten lighter or easier or whatever the politically correct term is.
We'll be right back.
If you have a story you'd like to share, please give me a call at 623-396-6069. You don't even have to talk to me if you don't want to. You can leave a voicemail. You can send me a letter at parentlesspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for taking the time to stop in. If you'd like to support the show and have access to exclusive content, please visit www.patreon.com/parentlesspodcast.
One of the things that helped me get through both funerals was my extended family, cousins, uncles. Everybody has their part and everybody pitched in. So I didn't have to do anything except pay for it, but they really helped carry a lot of the details and stuff. So that made it easier. Yeah.
Good. Well, you kind of brought it up a little bit, but tell me, how has, the death of your parents kind of made an impact on your life? And that's, I know it's such a cheap shot question. I'm starting to hate it because obviously we know this, it makes a change, but we need to talk about it. So there we go. Let's talk about it.
I think I am more comfortable talking about illness and death with people. And just like the conversation we had now, you won't always feel the perfect emotion. Sometimes you will feel angry. Sometimes you will feel relieved. And I think that it should be okay to say those things because there's always context. There's always background. And part of the bullshit we have around death is that we always want to say the polite thing, but sometimes that's really unhelpful. Because I am self-employed, I was always a little bit nervous about what I was going to do. And because it's just me, I make all the decisions. I do all of the stuff. But after hearing my dad say that, he was scared and he wished he'd done this, that, and the other, I'm choosing to be a little bit braver in some of my decisions. So I'm one of those people that can overthink, but now I'm like, okay, let's just try it. No guts, no glory. What's going to happen? And I started being a lot more conscious of what I want my life to look like. What do I really, really want? Not what sounds good, not what will get me in Oprah magazine, but what do I really want? I mean, when I turned 30, anybody who I didn't like, I pushed out of my life. So that wasn't a thing. I've got no time for shitty people. But setting goals for myself, and that thing of your ship won't come in if you never sent it out to begin with. I had to send mine out a couple of years ago. So that's kind of how the death has had an impact on me. Yeah. The weirdest thing is when my mom passed away, there's a lot of, ritual is the wrong word. There's a lot of cultural aspects you have to deal with. So theoretically, my mom should have been buried next to my dad. That was the one thing she never wanted. She wanted to be buried where her parents are. In my culture, that does not happen at all. she would be buried next to my dad, whatever she wanted. It just didn't happen that she could say what she wanted. So one of the things I'm kind of proud of is I caused a bit of a split in my family because I buried her where she wanted to be buried, next to her parents. I mean,
I bet that's might be a big split. You say kind of a split, but I don't know. And you're proud of it. I like that. I like it.
The way I feel is like my mom was mine. You don't get to turn up at the last minute and then make decisions about where she will be buried when you weren't there when she was ill.
Good call.
But in my culture, it's not done. So, hey, you know what? It's okay. I can't bring myself to feel guilty about that. So that's one of the other ways that I've changed. Yeah, I'm not interested in culture over choice. Yeah.
I like that you were, because I mean, that would have been a choice that your mom, it doesn't matter to your mom. You know, I mean, it did when she was alive, but in death, it wasn't mattering to her, but that would have been something that you had to live with if you knew that that was something that she wanted and you didn't follow through with that. So yeah. I feel proud of you for being like brave enough to do that. Now you don't have to carry like some strange guilt about you not carrying out your mom's wishes.
There's so much guilt just to put down about so many things. And then let me just say, my culture is beautiful. It is rich and it is complex and it's not just shitty people, but there are just some things I refuse to do.
All right. Well, let's just go right on into something else that's going to be a bit heavy here.
Oh.
Do you like my approach? You can't tell it's going to be heavy.
I like the way you build up to it and you give a little warning. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. All right. So tell me what, and I say one thing, but I really don't literally mean one thing. If you have a few things, that's fine too. But what would you like to say to your parents today if you could?
Wow. So much. So much. I would say, I miss you. I love you. I wish I had known you both better. I wish, that I'd known you just both a little bit better. I've got no idea who their friends were when they were teenagers, and it'd be nice just to have known some of those little details. And I guess I have this, what do you call it? Daydream, fantasy, whatever you want to call it, that I wish I could see them in a dream and have one more conversation with them. It tore me apart the first time I dreamt about my dad after he had passed. Because in the dream, it was just a normal day and we were having a normal conversation. And then I woke up and it was like I'd lost him all again because I didn't just take that chance to ask him all of the things that I wanted to ask or ask him something important. Honestly, like I stayed in bed that whole day just crying. So that's what I tell them, that, I miss them. And I hope... No, well, I'm Christian, so I believe that now that they are healthy, that their bodies are strong, and that is one of the thoughts that keeps me going. And I just wish I could speak to them again, but I do have recordings of their voices. Just like my dad was telling me something in Sesotho, so he was telling me the months of the year, and he was telling me what the names mean. And my father spoke a pure, deep, difficult Sesotho. I won't make the analogy because I don't know that much about it. But I think like there's German and then there's Higher German. And a lot of people don't speak Higher German. They speak. So I guess to make the comparison, Sesotho can be like that.
Okay.
So he was explaining to me what the months mean and how it relates to our culture and the times of the year and all of this kind of thing. And just to have that recording of his voice is I think that's my most precious thing.
You mentioned that the first dream that you had about your dad. So do you still dream of him? And do you ever dream of your mom?
I have this belief. Don't ask me where I got it from, but I think that people who have passed and that are important to us come to us in our dreams at different stages. And my mom has not come to me yet. So maybe she knows that even just the thought of it now, I can feel a lump blocking my throat. So, I'm not ready for that yet, but I would love to speak to both of them. I'd just like more time with them. And yeah.
So you mentioned that you're Christian. And so do you ever talk out loud to them? Or do you ever have any other dealings that might be spiritual-ish?
I'm an odd kind of Christian. So yeah, speak to, I guess,
because some people say, oh, well, they can't hear me now. So they won't speak to them.
Yes. And I can get how it feels weird, but I guess like when you're in the crying stage where it just punches you in the stomach and you fall on the floor and start crying, that grieving stage, then I guess, I would speak to them, and it's all of those, me just saying, I miss you and all of that kind of thing. For me, I guess I don't speak directly to them, but I do pray, and I pray about my parents and for my parents. Am I getting away from your question? Sorry.
No, but you're leading me to another question. So when you pray for your parents, what do you pray for?
I guess reassurance. It's like, I believe in this, but if you would just kind of, move the pepper pots to show me that you are okay. Because that's the difficult thing about it. It's like, yeah, I'm a Christian, I've got faith, but it's not that I want proof, but it would be really cool if you could send me an email. I don't know. It's not an easy thing to navigate. My faith is not, I believe in God 100%, but I don't know all of the rules so that I am absolutely secure in what these beliefs are. For me, having faith makes things easier. I think if I didn't have faith, I'm not sure how we would deal. But I'm married to an atheist, so
that's interesting.
No judgment. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to talk a little bit about religion and what beliefs are, not specifically, I guess, religion, but that does tie in quite a bit. Yeah. Where did you meet your husband?
We met in Lesotho. I had just finished university and I was working at a golf club, and he started a contract in Lesotho and he came to play golf, and it kind of grew from there. So he was in Lesotho for 4 years, and at the end of his contract, we knew that we were serious about each other. So he was like, so what's happening now? I would like you to come with me. And for me, that meant leaving my home, leaving my family, leaving my job, and leaving everything that gives you security and betting on one person, because as an expat, only one of you is normally allowed to work. So now I have no financial independence, if you like. Exactly. That. Your facial expressions.
Wow. I didn't know that part.
Yeah. that part.
People say I talk with my eyes. So my eyes are really big and my eyebrows were up in my head. And wow.
So it's basically, you go to a different country. Sometimes you are just officially, you're like the spouse of, so you don't even have a title. You kind of lose your identity because we use our job titles as so much of our identity.
I know that's yeah. That's scary to me. So that was a big choice. And plus your family.
Exactly. Leaving my family. And then it's like, okay, I have to rely on this man for everything. So being an expat is yes. And I feel like I made the right choice.
We talked about your religion. You mentioned a brief, tiny bit previously about therapy, but we didn't go into much about that. So what are your coping mechanisms that you may use?
I'm really good at burying things and ignoring them. That used to be my coping mechanism, but and this is so weird because basically only my husband and a couple of friends knew that I was in therapy. I hadn't even told my kids, but hey, no guts, no glory. Part of doing this is about removing stigma for myself. I'm that person that encourages my friends to go to therapy. So why the hell shouldn't I say it out loud on a podcast, you know? So therapy for me wasn't about just grief counseling. It was also about removing some of the blocks that I had as an adult that I felt were holding me back. And I don't believe in blaming your parents for everything that's gone wrong in your life. But I feel some of the foundations I had were shaky and I developed coping mechanisms that no longer serve me or where I want to be. So I have to undo a lot of processes and create new ones. And I didn't know how to create the new ones. So that's what therapy was for me. Yeah.
And you mentioned undoing a lot of the processes that have been put in place for you. Now, I would imagine that means that like talking about things would be one of those. You said your house was very secretive.
It was secretive.
Yeah.
It was frightening. It was tense. There was domestic abuse. There was emotional and financial abuse. You see, it's so odd. All of those things were there, but it seems weird to say. But then there were also other things as well. It wasn't like one long nightmare.
Right. You still had love there too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But those things shape you. And
yeah, they do. So nobody's placing any blame, but we're recognizing that our parents have had a big part in our lives.
That is it. Yes. So, you don't have to be what your past has made you. You can choose to move on. And that's what I chose to do because I always felt like I was getting stuck in the same place and wasn't making progress. And I didn't want to be that person at 50 years old that looks back and say, oh, well, I should have done. So yeah, I tried.
And where did you get that from? Your dad's last words. So like, there you go.
I know we've come full circle. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, therapy was helpful. For me, I would like to continue with it, but I also feel like I need a therapist that is familiar with, if not my culture, then at least is part of the diaspora and understands the way that families interact, the way that people interact on my continent or sub-Saharan Africa, because I feel it's very alien to anybody who has grown up in the US, even if they are African American. Yeah, that it at the end, I got tired of explaining my culture.
How long did you go to therapy?
A year.
Okay. Yeah. And you found it personally helpful. And it sounds like if you were able to find someone different that would work better for you, then you would go back into it.
Yeah. Or I would concentrate more on like, if you like, personal development than all my emotional stuff. And then like 2 therapists for like different parts of me. Let's see what we can get with this medical insurance, because it costs a lot of money. I'm going to use it.
Let's see. So you said, yeah, we already talked about that. Yeah, sometimes I ask, is there anything that you want to say to a therapist or a counselor? And you talked about understanding your culture.
That'd be good. What else would I say? If I had another therapist, I would say, I'm going to email you all of my issues and how I deal with things and how I see the world. So can we not please have that painful first session where you're digging and I'm holding onto a cushion for dear life because you're excavating all my emotions? Read the email and let's start working. I guess that would defeat the purpose if I'm going to therapy to.
You're
to
like,
work.
hey, now, this is how we're doing therapy.
So that's one thing I would say to a therapist. Yeah. Read the email and then work from there.
Is there anything that reminds you of your mom or dad, like a song, a smell, a sight, a taste, a season, anything like that just brings you memories of your parents?
Yes, there is. But I'll tell you the weirdest thing is, like, after my mom passed and I went to the funeral, I got back to the US and I was in Whole Foods. And it's like, I'd got back and I'd cried and all of this kind of thing. And it was like a week later, but I was in Whole Foods and I was walking down the spice section, right? Mm. So because she was diabetic and she had a heart problem, she didn't need to eat any salt whatsoever. And they were complaining that the food tasted like crap at home. So I was planning to get all of these salt-free herbs and spices and all of this kind of thing that you can get in Whole Foods. And I was just going to send them home. And then I saw those spices, and that is when I absolutely lost my shit. I am that mad Black woman that had a meltdown in Whole Foods just by looking at spices. Like, I was on the floor holding onto my knees, just crying. They thought I'd had a mental breakdown or something. And even when I explained to them, I'm like, no, it's the spices. They remind me of my mom. It doesn't make sense.
Oh, so what happened? What happened when you explained that to them? Were they just...
No, they were really nice. But I mean, I think I was scaring their customers. So they took me to like a back room and helped me calm down. And then I explained, and, they were really kind. So that happened. So I couldn't walk down the spice aisle for 3 months. I just couldn't do it. That was the weirdest thing. And then with my dad, his feet was really swollen, so he could only wear Crocs, those really horrible, ugly garden shoes. Mm-hmm. So with him, it was that. After he passed, I was in a store, and of course they had Crocs hanging there because they were really popular. And I really couldn't breathe. It's like I couldn't get the air into my lungs, and I just had to leave the store. And I'm not sure how I got out of there because I couldn't see and I was crying. And yeah, so after their passing, there was that. There is a song, and it's in Sesotho.
Good. I'm excited to hear this.
It's not a great song. I will send it to you. Send it to you because you won't be able to hear it. Yeah, it's not even a famous song or anything, but because we grew up in the UK, all we had around us that was part of my culture was music, and my parents really used to love this song, and it's by an artist called Mparanyana. I think that's how you say it. I'll send it to you because I think it's called Hlotse. I heard that song when I was visiting home, and that reminds me of my parents. The first time I heard it, I lost my shit. But now I play it because, well, my partner is from the UK, so I'm the only person in my house who actually speaks or understands Sotho. So when I just feel like I want to be close to my parents and my culture, that's a song that I will play. That was a really long answer. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I hear my family, and I'm sure you do too. Now we need to get into what you do. What do you do?
Okay. I am a podcast editor, so I edit podcasts for people. I'm also a podcast coach. When I started doing this, there was just a lot of, if you like, male energy around it. And it was always about the best equipment and you shouldn't podcast unless you've got a fabulous studio. And I was just like, no, this is bull. Anybody can. And, to me, it's really about telling the stories and important conversations. It's not about being the most famous. So I'm a podcast editor because I love audio and I love to hear conversations. So yeah, that is what I do. And my company is called Podcast Maven.
Very good. I like that. There's days where, cause I do most of my things myself, but there's days where I think it would be really awesome that would just be the job, you know? That would be great. So I'm glad that you're able to do that. And do you find it quite successful? You're doing good?
I am. It's grown. It's growing. A lot of people are getting into it, which is really cool. Yeah. And I like that there's a lot of a community of women that's in it and we're supporting each other. So that's very cool as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess we should bring up that we actually met in a podcasting group that's for women. So
yes, we did.
You are my third interview to come out of that group, I believe.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, which it's just super interesting because all of you have been very strong women and kind of go-getters. So
thank you. It's weird. I encourage people to do interviews, but I don't do a lot myself. So this was like me pushing myself to talk about things that I feel like are important. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me on.
Yes, you're welcome. And I completely understand. Tell me, do you have a website?
I do. It's podcastmaven.com. It's being hopefully rejigged this year. Yeah. So we're going through a little bit of a polishing process, but like you said, I do everything alone. So it's on my list. But it's podcastmaven.com.
And what's your Instagram?
_podcast_Maven. And Instagram is my thing. You really won't find me on other platforms. I like Instagram. Again, it's a bit quiet. It's December, people. I also need a break, but I will be back in January. So yeah, I don't like social media, but it's a necessary evil.
Is there anything else that we have not talked about that you wanted to make sure to say?
Not that I can think of. I liked your questions. It was so hard to answer them. But no, not that I can think of. But if you do think of anything else, I can always record an answer for you.
Very good. Well, I mean, I guess I have another question for you. I mean, if somebody wants to, I noticed that you have some free resources, about your, like a podcast, right? If you want to get started, you have something there that people can access. On your Instagram, you have lots of different, tips and tricks. So if somebody wants to come to you to kind of have you help them with their podcast, just get a hold of you and what kinds of things will you help them with?
I can help you with everything from just getting clear on your idea to all the steps to launching your show, advising on equipment. We can do practice interviews. Get in touch, either on Instagram. Feel free to ask me questions. Questions will not cost you anything whatsoever. And info@podcastmaven.com is the easiest way to get in touch with me. I am an email lady. Yeah, info@podcastmaven.com.
All right. So Elizabeth and Molapo, thank you so much for sharing your story about them with us.
Thank you.
Patricia, thank you so much. It was so great to meet you.
You too, Steph. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Empty faces, covered in cars, spreading fake skin, passing me by.
Parentless is recorded in Phoenix, Arizona. Find us on social media and any podcast platform. Music provided by Colin the Coco and the Revolving Birds. Studio provided by Fat Kid Productions. Check out one of the many shows available on our network. I'm your host, Stephanie Relaford. Thank you for listening to Parentless.